So, Lee, are you there?
I am. Nice to be with you, Angie. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's good to see you. Lee Smith is the senior editor at the Weekly Standard, writes great stuff all over the place. I saw you in the Federalist, and I saw your piece about the Steele dossier in the Federalist. And the reason I wanted to have you on is because this story, every time I read about it, I find it by the third paragraph, I can't follow it. It's so complex.
Right.
And in order for people to understand it, they have to remember what the Steele dossier is, and we have to give at least some explanation of the Magnitsky Act. So let's start with what the Steele dossier was and where it came from.
Okay, the Steele dossier was a file compiled by a Washington, D.C. communications firm called Fusion GPS. And what it is, this is the premise for the Trump-Russia narrative, or the Great Kremlin conspiracy, as I like to call it, that's been filling the media, print and broadcast, for nearly a year now. It was this insane congeries of, unfortunately, pornographic fantasy, the different stuff that the President Trump was supposed to have been doing. Clearly, there's some disinformation in there. Clearly, there's also things that may be true. They may have actually heard different Russian officials saying different things to other Russian officials. But it's named the Steele dossier because the man whose byline was on it is Christopher Steele,
and this
former.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This is the document, though, that made Comey. I mean, Comey was kind of swayed by this, wasn't he?
I think that Comey took a lot of it to heart, but it's unclear why, whether or not he was part of. I mean, look, what the Steele dossier is, it's political warfare, right? It's political warfare, and Comey, it's unclear whether or not Comey was participating in a campaign of political warfare against newly elected President Trump when he and other intelligence officials went and briefed both outgoing President Obama and incoming President Trump on the existence of a nonsensical document that the press held off on publishing because none of it was verifiable.
Okay.
The point of briefing President Obama and President Trump on this nonsensical dossier, and we can go into further details about why it's absurd, the whole premise of it. The reason that they briefed Obama and Trump was to put it into the open, right? So at that point, the press could report, all of these press organizations already had the document. They would not publish it because they knew it was nonsense. They couldn't verify it. But it was when the intelligence community briefed Presidents Obama and President Trump on it, they thought that they could go out and release this dossier, what it said. CNN was the first one out reporting on the briefing, and then it was BuzzFeed that same afternoon that that actually released the document.
Oh, okay, so now we've got the Steele document.
I know, it is a little complicated.
I want to keep it as simple because it's very hard to follow. So we've got the Steele document. It's sometimes called it's the thing with the Russian prostitutes and all this stuff. Right. So we've got that, and it's come out. Now on the other side, we have the Magnitsky Act, and I don't want to get into the deep weeds, but the press keeps basically saying, oh, this is about Russian adoption, but that's not what it's about. The Magnitsky Act, Magnitsky was a lawyer who was basically murdered by Putin's Russia. Is that fair to say?
Yes, he was detained in jail, mistreated, and likely murdered. I mean, there's certainly a lot of evidence that Magnitsky was murdered in jail by his captors.
And so to punish the Russians, they passed this thing that has become known as the Magnitsky Act, right?
Yes, William Browder, had hired Magnitsky to look into corruption against him. The Russian officials pulled Magnitsky and put him in jail. So Bill Browder has been the driving force behind the Magnitsky Act, which sanctions different Russian officials close to the regime of Vladimir Putin.
And so and Putin hates this because it makes it hard for them to feed their money out into Western banks, right? Is that
exactly?
Okay.
So it's a key Russian foreign policy goal to try to dismantle that sanctions regime against Russian officials.
Okay, and I know this is a big part of how Putin has bought his way to power is letting people deal with letting people basically buy up what the Soviet Union used to own and then send their money out to the West. Okay,
Yeah.
so what is the connection between the Steele dossier and the Magnitsky Act?
The Steele dossier, as I said, was compiled by a Washington, D.C. communications firm known as Fusion GPS. So ostensibly, they put this out there to show that Donald Trump was going to colluding with different Russian officials and the quid pro quo was he would win the 2016 presidential election with Russia's help if he promised to dismantle sanctions on Russia. So Fusion GPS put that document out there. Except Fusion GPS is also a part of the anti-Magnitsky campaign. They are working on behalf of Russian interests to dismantle a sanctions regime against Russian officials.
So this propaganda factory has been hired by Russian officials to propagandize against the Magnitsky Act.
Right. So the thing that we have to look at then, and this is something a couple of press outfits have mentioned that this is curious, but most of them have not. Most of the people that we're watching, whether it's CNN, whether it's NBC, large parts of the print media, they're not putting together the fact that this company, this organization, is doing, on one hand, is clearly paid by Russia, and on the other hand, the more closely we look at it, it seems quite possible the Steele dossier is also a function of a Russian information war campaign. That's what this is. So I think that it's time that people look very closely at what this organization is doing. Thank goodness up on the Hill now, Senator Grassley is looking closely at this. Just yesterday, I believe it was, two of Fusion GPS's principals decided to take the Fifth Amendment and not answer questions regarding the Steele dossier and probably anti-Magnitsky campaign as well.
So how does the press, I mean, we've been talking all week here about NBC and their incredibly corrupt behavior around the Harvey Weinstein scandal, basically putting the lid on their entertainment arm as well as their news arm. But NBC was involved in this as well, weren't they?
Yes. William Browder, when I spoke and I wrote the long article for The Federalist, William Browder believes that Ken Delanian from NBC News is working. He alleges that they're working in tandem with Fusion GPS.
Wow.
Browder also says, and this is I have this from a few other journalists as well, is that Fusion GPS is a very important organization in the city. They in Washington and in New York, they assemble lots of different stories and they put them out, they hand them out to people. These guys are deeply embedded in the press, in press circles. Browder said that when he tried to get the attention of different editors here in Washington and in New York in what Fusion GPS, the role they were playing in the Magnitsky campaign, they all backed off. The journalists, the editors backed off saying, sorry, Fusion GPS is much too embedded in our processes. We're not going to go after them. You may have seen, you may have seen yesterday also one more thing is that it's not just, they have their hands in lots of very dirty campaigns. You may have seen a story in Fox News yesterday about Fusion GPS's role in smearing Venezuelan journalists, Thor Halvorson, Alec Boyd. Fox did a story on this last night. I reported this for Tablet magazine about 2 months ago. So Fusion GPS, it's important to understand the different things they do. They don't just package articles for journalists to pick up on. They also manage smear campaigns.
Yeah, this is
That's
a big
what
thing.
the Steele dossier is. It's a smear campaign against Trump. And they did this in Venezuela as well. They're doing it with Bill Browder.
Did they? I mean, I know this is a big part of the news now. These guys who just feed smears to the media, and the media use the smears so they don't want to alienate the sources of the smears. They want to. So what is it about Donald Trump and the Magnitsky Act? Did Putin basically think that Trump would not touch the Magnitsky Act, but maybe Hillary would? Do you think?
I'm not sure if it's that clear. I mean, my sense is that an information operation like this, the target can't be too specific, right? So for me, from the very beginning, the idea that somehow they were going after Hillary to ensure Trump's victory seemed nonsensical, right? They might have thought, who knows what goes through their head? Oh, yeah, we would prefer Trump. But these things backfire so quickly. An information operation has to be very broad. I think the target was, which they hit, was to sow confusion in the American political system. That's what they look at how easily it backfires, right? They say, well, we're going to try to elect Trump, and then they elect Trump. Then all this news comes out, and the president, who's actually in power, is like, well, I can't give these guys a break, or I'll look like I'm crooked. I have to come down even harder on them. And the Russians have been doing information operations for a very long time. We'll go back to the elders of the protocols of Zion. They know how to run information campaigns. This was supposed to be a very broad campaign. It was. They've been hugely successful.
It's an amazing.
Thanks partly to the American press. Thanks in large part to the American press.
Who plays along, no question about it. Lee Smith, senior editor of the Weekly Standard. I know you've just been through an ordeal yourself. I really appreciate your coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very kindly.
It's great seeing you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
This is, I'm reading Cheryl Atkinson's new book, Smear, and she just talks about this, is that you cannot, this is now a major part of the news business, is printing these smears that are fed to you by operatives, and Fusion GPS is among the chief. This was basically perfected by the Clinton campaign when they were going after the bimbos, as they called them, who Clinton was abusing. This is kind of they kind of invented the modern smear, and it's being carried on like this. The one thing about Putin is you've got to remember he could not have known that Donald Trump was going to be president of the United States. He must have been playing his game to wrong foot Hillary, because he must have thought she was, and it sounds like he bought her. It really does.